Well, good morning, precalc kids. I have a wonderful surprise for you. You are taking a formative quiz. Again, that just means it counts like homework, but everybody gets a little stressed when somebody says there's a quiz. So I'm going to do a couple practice problems with you before we take the quiz, because the quiz only has 5 problems on it, and that's really my only plan for today is to take this quiz. Then you'll be able to see the key and grade the quiz out of 10 points because there's only 10 answers. All right. And I'm going to start that right now. So here we go. First off, I hope you remember how to factor. Oh my goodness. If you don't remember how to factor, you're toast. I warned you about this. You have to know how to factor. All right. So let's go with, make it 2 negatives on this one. There we go. So that's a quadratic, and you're supposed to know how to solve it. Let's just start with that simple one. So let's pause for a second, have you try that. And this should be a super easy one. Okay, hopefully you're back after having done that one. And you'll have x and minus 5 and plus 1. And remember that I do this in 3 stages? The variables, then the signs. I knew it had to be a positive and a negative because the answer to this number is a negative 5. And a negative times a positive is the only way you get that. You can't have 2 positives and you can't have 2 negatives. All right, so now I'm going to say my answer is going to be double checked. First, I'm going to do the outside ones, and then I'm going to check the inside ones to make sure this actually worked. Outside, 1x, inside, negative 5x, total, negative 4x. That's just what I wanted. If I'd gotten the opposite of what I wanted, I would have switched the signs around. Not the numbers, the signs. All right, so then that's factoring. Great, but you haven't actually solved anything yet. To solve this, you need to get the 2 answers, which are x equals 5 and x equals negative 1. All right, what are those things? Those are the things that make this 0 when you stick them in. They're also the roots, they're also the zeros, and they're also the x-intercepts. All right, so now let's talk about what if this thing hadn't been set equal to 0? Well, then the first thing you would have needed to do is move that number over to the other side by subtracting it. You got to get it equal to 0, otherwise you can't possibly solve it. All right, next thing. Let's say that we are factoring something that's got an x to the 3rd in the front. Well, you better hope that you have an extra x on everything. Do you get that this has a greatest common factor of an x that's in everything? That x needs to factor out. And I don't want to give away all of the parts of the test, but we'll just remind you that on that type of a question, you got to factor the x out first. And just take the x out of each thing. Divide each thing by x. That's how you get what goes in here, and then factor it again. All right, next little tip I want to give you. Just the plain old-fashioned absolute value kind. If there's stuff besides the grouping symbol, like in this case, this number is there, and it needs to get out of there before I can solve this for x. The stuff on the outside happens first. Why? Because of PEMDAS. You always start with add and subtract in solving equations. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but then we go backwards. So the last thing you will do is parentheses or grouping symbols. All right, so I ask myself, is there anything I could add or subtract? Yeah, I could subtract 7 from both sides. 8 minus 7 is 1. And then, I hope you remember how to solve it from here. Let's pause for a second and see if you can finish this one. Okay, I'm back, and let's see if you did this right. You split it into two equations. 2x minus 3 equals 1. 2x minus 3 equals negative 1. Why? Because what's in here could either be 1 or negative 1. That's why you need two equations. Then you should be able to solve them from there. Now, last but not least, what have you got a square root? You can do a problem like this perfectly. Square both sides and get rid of the square root that way. Negative 2 squared is 4. And then add 5 to both sides. And then divide by 3, divide by 3. X equals 3. And it seems perfect. And then you go back and put it in. And you put in the 3. And holy cow, I have the square root of 4 is negative 2. That was the original problem. It's in red. The square root of 4 is not negative 2. So moral of the story, you could follow all the rules for solving this right, and yet still have the answer come out not a real answer. It doesn't check out. So I'd have to write extraneous next to it. All right. So there is my 6.5 minutes of tips for you before you take a little formative quiz. And again, don't get overstressed if you bomb this thing. This is just for practice. But frankly, you shouldn't bomb it, especially with the little coaching I just gave you. I'm hoping for lots of 7s, 8s, and 9s out of 10. Maybe even the occasional unicorn who can pull off the perfect paper. All right. Good luck.